welcome all to Forest in Time of Crisis and Preparedness. My name is Alessandra Giolo, and I am a PhD student at Silfwerbrand University. And my project is about forest governance in the Baltic states. So today I am supporting Fredrik in this event about forest and security. I will pass the word to Fredrik so he can introduce himself and the event itself, and then I will give a short speech about my project.
Thank you, Alessandra, and good morning, everyone. I'm Fredrik. I'm from the Liaison Unit Sweden, which is part of the Swedish Chairmanship of Forest Europe 2025 to 2026. Forest Europe is a voluntary collaboration between 44 European countries and EU. And at the beginning of our chairmanship, we asked our signatories what we should work on during the Swedish chairmanship. And one of the topics that were raised was geopolitical preparedness, how to include that on the political agenda in Europe, forests part of geopolitical preparedness. And in Forest Europe, we have different tools. One of them is these high-level policy dialogues. We will invite decision makers and experts to talk about different topics. We also make policy briefs to our signatories, giving advice to our signatories how to approach different topics. And the plan is to continue this work with a policy brief with these experts, but also if there are other experts that want to join that work. And the plan is to present the results at the Ministerial Conference in June. I also have help from Veronica and Johan today, who have done a lot of the background work, the technical stuff and the marketing. So thank you so much, Johan and Veronica, and it's me and Alessandra who will moderate this meeting today. So I will start with sharing the agenda and show that for you quickly. So today's agenda, we have the introduction that we are talking about right now, and then we will have some presentations by our experts and our decision maker. We'll take a short break. We will have a panel discussion, and then we will open up for questions from you in the audience. So please write your questions in the chat. That would be helpful and great so that we can have the experts answer them. And after that, we will close the webinar and talk about how to proceed with the policy brief. So back to you, Alessandra.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to give a sort of introduction speech to the topics that we're talking about today. And first of all, thank you to all of our speakers to share their knowledge with us today. And I hope that this webinar will benefit all of us and leave us with some better understanding of the role of forest in this time of geopolitical changes. So I'm going to start talking about security. When we say security, most people picture just soldiers, borders, and budget. But the world is teaching us through fires, floods, pandemics, cyber attacks, and wars, that national security also depends on the living system that keeps society running. And forests are part of this system. They are not just a scenery or a sector, they are preparedness, readiness infrastructures. So the themes of today are simple, but as urgent. So first, forest strengthens societal preparedness by stabilizing landscape and supporting essential function during disruptions. Second, the forest sector must be engaged proactively and systematically in preparedness planning alongside civil protection. And third, we need to elevate public awareness so that measures taken in forestry are understood as part of our shared security, not just a sectoral management. But what does that mean in practice? we can think of forest as a stress test. In a stress test, we ask which functions must not fail. So water that is drinkable, energy that is available, material available for repair and shelter, safe access to responder, reliable information to decide quickly. And forests do touch all of these areas. They regulate water flows, buffer heats, reduce landslide and flood risk, and when managed wisely, provide renewable materials and bioenergy that can substitute for disruption imports. So forest roads and right-of-way can become lifelines for emergency access, communication, and logistics. The people who manage forests as owner, contractors, operators are skilled workforce already accustomed to operating heavy equipment in difficult conditions. And this is a latent capacity that we cannot afford to ignore. And all of this understanding is finally starting to be recognized in policymaking. The security narrative is evolving from a narrow, state-centric concept to one that includes human security, climate security, and natural resource security. In Europe, this shift is filtering to the latest planning instrument, such as the National Energy and Climate Plans, where resilience, diversification, and domestic renewable resources are explicitly prioritized. It is also visible in disaster risk reduction strategies, climate adaptation plans, and biodiversity frameworks that treat healthy forests as risk buffers and insurance assets. So the direction seems to be clear. Security is not only about deterring threats, it is about reducing vulnerability and ensuring continuity of essential services. And forests do both of this. But recognition on paper is not enough. So preparedness is a contract sport and it requires new routine. For example, coordinated planning, civil protection authorities, water agency, and the forest sector should be planning together before the emergency, so the roles and the priorities are clear. Capacity and readiness, training, and simple shared procedure turn goodwill into capability. For example, who calls who, which areas are priority to keep accessible, and which export and import stream can be directed if borders are closed. Data and decision support, remote sensing, and up-to-date inventories enable rapid choices when uncertainties comes up. And finally, public communication. Communities must understand why certain action, like access maintainers or temporary harvesting for safety, are taken. So this trust building calm times pays off in the times of crisis. And so in short, the security narrative is widening, and rightly so. Human security, natural resource security, and climate security are not simply adds-on. They are the foundation on which traditional security stands. So if we get forest and forest management right, so we have healthier, more diverse, and better connected and fully integrated into preparedness, we can reduce the risk, expand option, and strengthen national security in the most practical senses. So the ability to keep society functioning when the world presents us with crises and uncertainties as Europe is facing right now. Thank you. Now I will stop talking and I will pass the word to Igor Buksha, who is a PhD, Head of Department of Forest Inventory, Monitoring, Certification and Forest Management Planning of the UK Research Institute. And he will present what is happening in Ukraine with forest and forestry since the invasion and how forests are used for. Please, Igor.
Thank you, Alessandra. Are you hearing me okay? Let me share my presentation. Hopefully, do you see my presentation?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Igor Buksha from Ukraine, and it's pleasure to me to share our information about forest and forestry, how to our forests impacted by Russian invasion. And sorry, it's okay. First of all, I would like to give you a brief information about forest of Ukraine. It is information about total territory of country, which include part territory which temporarily occupied by Russia. Ukraine, it is one of forest deficit countries in Europe. The forest cover consists around 60% of land, and from area we have around 10 million of forest covered by forest 9.6 million hectare. It's placed 9 places in the Europe because scale of country is big, and of course the total amount of forest is big enough. The timber stock is 2.3 billion hectare. We have mostly conifer and broadleaf forest. The main species is pine and oak. Annually in forest of Ukraine growing around 35 million cubic meter of wood, and average harvested around 15 million. It's approximately 33% from the total yearly growing change stock. Ukraine forests have very important environmental function, because in the western part of country, especially in the Carpathian region, there are a lot of primary forest and a lot of biodiversity forest species growing in Ukraine forest. And very important, also the forest of Ukraine include a lot of green gases absorbed from 11 to 25 million ton of CO2 equivalent per year. This is really on the graphic you can see, starting from 19, it was 25 million ton of CO2 equivalent per year, but nowadays it's around 11. It's due to different impact of forest by fire, cutting, and also due to aging of forest, because we have mostly middle-aged forest, and early increment go down due to change of age. Infinite mass of Ukrainian forest accumulate over 800 million ton of carbon. In this indicator, Ukraine places the 6th place in Europe. Our forest mainly in the ownership of governmental, up to 80%, and we have only around 1% of private forest, and 30% is communal forest. About impact of war on forest. It is a different direct and indirect impact, which due to artillery and missile shelling, due to strike by air and drones, combat operation involving heavy military equipment. and also very big impact from the military waste, which contaminate by chemical, by unexploded object. And finally, we face it with phenomena of a lot of wildfires due to war impact on the forest. And as consequences, we face it with partly of with deforestation, habitat loss, pollution and contamination of soil. Especially huge impact was done on the emerald net to biodiversity decline. And this impact increased the risk of desertification and have the long-term ecological damage. What is the direct forest affected by holistiers, by occupation of mines? And we face it with a lot of fires. I will say about a bit later. And the lack of access to forest. We have possibility to manage forest properly because part of forest contaminated by unexploded object. Also, very huge impact was done to the forest infrastructure. Personnel lost, and this lead to restricted management access and restricted to manage forest properly. You see on the picture impact of war on the forestry. It was done in the eastern part of country due to mining. And also huge impact was done to the forestry infrastructure for the offices, garages. You see in Sumy region picture from Trostianets forestry, as well as impact for the Trostianets forestry research station. On the top of picture, it's a before war. On the bottom is the after war. The same impact for forest infrastructure was done in the Kyiv region. On this picture, this building of State Forestry Inventory Service, which was attacked by Russian, and due to fire, they lost huge archive of and documentation, which description forest management plans, and lot of valuable information which collected during a lot of years. The general picture of impact war on the Ukrainian forest, around 2.5 million hectares of forest land was influenced by military operation. Thanks to Ukrainian Defense Force, 1 million hectares of forest land was deoccupied, but around 1 million still under occupation. It's marked by red color on the map. Blue color is deoccupied territory. And due to mining and unexploded object, there are a lot of territory, approximately 0.45 million hectares already have been mined. And this territory is still dangerous for people and is non-accessible for forest management operation, for cutting, for preventive forest. So it is a huge problem, and according to World Bank assessments, the full range of humanitarian demining works in the forest is valuated about $37 billion United States dollars. And time for such demining can reach centuries. The direct impacts of forest, I already mentioned, shelling, fire after shelling, logging wood for fortification, construction of fortification also have a huge impact on the soil. Logging wood for firewood and especially illegal logging on the occupied territory. Russian soldiers cut a lot of forest in the eastern part of country, and this part of this wood used for building of fortification, and part of wood move out to the different purpose in the occupied territory. On the slide, you see data from Center for Monitoring, Eastern European Monitoring Center. It's the last data, and the total area of forest for the period of the war from 2022 up to 2025 is 3.3 million hectares. And associated green gas emission are around 50 million tons CO2 equivalent. It is a huge impact for the climate because in total, when we account emission of green gases, not only from forest fire, but also from military equipment, also from different kind of military operation, this amount of green gas is like 3 or 4 European country emission per years. So this is this huge impact to the our atmosphere and lead to the climate change, to accelerate climate change. Landscape fire in Ukraine, we are used data from this center, and the data show us that before war the average area of forest fire was around 3.7 hectares. But during the war, this area increased significantly. Of course, the concentrate of wildfires in the south, in the south and east, in the east part of country. Forest fire monitoring and using forest management equipment in the military, it is dangerous. With support of WWF Ukraine, we are prepared some publication collected data about forest management and on territories contaminated with unexploded ordnance. This publication also exists in the English language and can be downloaded from the website of WWF. What is the strategic imperative for fire management system in the conflict zone? To overcome the consequences of war, it's necessary to recognize the priority of forest demining and focusing on the area near settlements. Necessary to increase the fire resilience of the forested land affected by war in the long-term perspective. It means to plan some prescribing fire to minimize risk of fire with dried wood have to be taken from the area, and send the priority of the restoration of destroyed K forestry facility, because I showed earlier a lot of offices, a lot of infrastructure was destroyed. And also need to prepare a single algorithm for collecting and analyze damage data. In this case, the modern technology should play a key role. I mean, data from satellite, remote sensitive data using the GIS system, and so on. What is the institutional and policy response have to be done? it's new challenges necessary to train forester on detection and this exploded object. This work done together with State Forestry Emergency Service and forest managers in the area which contaminated by an explosive object. To prepare emergency forestry management protocol, integration forest sector and into energy and recovery plan, and joint operation with civil protection, military to be in coordinate, and very important international support for mine clearance, forest monitoring, and for restoration. Of course, we have to take in consideration forest as source of resilience, because forests protect us as line for defense and shelter for defense forces. Very important firewood and biomass for heating, for energy substitution, for cooking. Construction timber for rebuilding homes, bridges and shelters. Of course, very important water security, because very often Russian troops use chemical shelter, and this chemical shelter contaminate waters in the conflict zone. Local food and income non-timber products can be support us during the crisis time, and safe refuge areas and protect forest belts for community purpose. Very important scientific and expert support, and UFRO creates the Task Force T49, post-conflict forest landscape restoration and making better. And also FST certification scheme prepared voluntary tools to strengthen forest management system in conflict zone. In Ukraine, these tools used in frame of national forest management standard of FSC, and give us possibility to not only assess the dangers, but also prepare some minimization of risk. Researchers also look to the wild forest like new challenge with fire governance. It is a picture from a project which prepared by Sergei Sidorenko, and this picture shows the complicated impact wildfires on the forest, on the environmental. Very important conclusion is the changes in the requirement for forest management information. We need the clear information, we need the real-time data monitoring, and this war has triggered radical change in such kind of requirement. I will, to facilitate it, just briefly inform about needs assessment of damage and harm caused to forest. We need to have map of combat operation and their consequences. We need to inventory of destroyed the damaged forest, and of course documentation of environmental crimes. Safety-related information also have to be collected during forest management planning. It means we have to know about mapping for minimum territories, to understand the restriction of access and economical activity in forest contaminated by an explosive object. And we have to adapt forest management to wartime condition. We have to supply data forest defense needs, and forest management information have to use, let's say, military failings. And also we have to be sure about energy security. In this context, it's very important decentralization for energy supply, and forest can be support us for local population, for community to get energy from forest. And also recovering and planning for reforestation. It's have to be in line when data collected for forest management planning. Of course, technological change also very important, have to be done priority for remote sensitive methods because it's minimize risk on the contaminated area and very important data management and data integration. We have to use interoperability data and joint data set from forestry, from civil security, and from different kind of Ministry of Defense and so on. I just saw some briefly about international support. It's really very important for us, and we have to know, just inform about support from Germany. It's very important for us. It's project promote multifunctional sustainable forest management planning and implementation in Ukraine. This project is ongoing and support with National Forest Inventory, support to harmonize Ukrainian legislation, forest legislation to European one, and also provide international expertise for forest management planning to focus it on the close to nature forestry. Another very important project was done by support of Czech Republic, Czech Development Agency. It is an ongoing project. This project focused on improving the forest management capacity according to European Union compliance. And activities include the development of mobile GIS tool to data collect. It's very important in the crisis region, crisis situation to have possibility collect data in digital form very fast and to change data interoperability. Also concentrate for the remote techniques and the development of central database and supply us by field equipment for data collect in the forest. And the last project we just starting now, it's sustainable raw material supply for forest-based energy in Ukraine. It's really important in time of war because the main goal project is support energy independence and using renewable energy from forestry. You see partners from Finnish and from Ukrainian part. The lesson learned, it is preparedness must be cross-sectorial. It's not only focus for forest, but fundamentally needs to integrate forestry, civil protection, and national security framework. The war has transformed forest information from simple forest management practice into strategic tool to assess national security and recovery planning. And very important investigation in advanced technology for forest monitoring and data collection. This system have to be interoperable and real-time supply data about state of forest, about meaning, about possibility to reconstruction. And very important for us is European solidarity. It is vital to support forest sector through the post-conflict recovery, in the wartime, post-conflict recovery, and the role of green reconstruction. And finally, forests are a strategic security infrastructure, essential for national and pan-European resilience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Igor. I think all of us really feel with you and the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian forest, and it's an awful situation that you're in. And I'm glad that we're helping you from Europe's side. Yeah, keep it up and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. Next up, many countries, including Sweden, stopped with preparedness after the Cold War ended. One of the countries that did not stop is Finland. So our next speaker is Olli Antonen. He is the Chief of Preparedness at the forest industry in Finland and also Pool Secretary of the Forest Pool. So please, Olli, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning to you all. I hope you're hearing me well. Today I will try to shed some light on how we see forest industry's relevance for security of supply in Finland. And I would like to thank Mr. Buksha also for a great presentation. It had really some interesting viewpoints, and I'll be happy if I get your slides later on, because I think we should also need to review them inside the forest also. But I go forward with my presentation. So, forest industry's relevance for security of supply. So, as said, my name is Olli Antonen. I'm Chief of Preparedness and Pool Secretary of the Forest Pool. I've been since 2021. Forest Pool's members are forest industry companies, and Pool acts as a link between its members and other parties involved in NESO. And here I have few key organizations explained, which will later on be also in this presentation. So I think it's good to view them at this point. So NESA is National Emergency Supply Agency, working under Finnish Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment, coordinating preparedness between the private and public sectors in NESO. And NESO is National Emergency Supply Organization, and it's a term to describe all the parties cooperating for security of supply, including companies, authorities, and so on. And NESA directs these operations within the NESO organization. And Finnish Forest Industries Federation is the Forest Pool's host organization. It's an advocacy organization for forest industry companies in Finland. And the staff of FFIF supports the Pool Secretary also with their special expertise in all things forest related. So first, forest industry's relevance for security of supply in Finland. Forest industry's relevance to security of supply covers many critical sectors through various value chains and networks. So on the left side, we see things that forest industry is dependent on. We depend on energy, electricity in particular, of course, liquid fuels and natural gas. And of course, we need raw materials and components for our production. Food, of course, some chemical products, water, and so on. Then we need logistics, land transports that provide us with the raw materials and also transport our products to ports. And then, of course, we need water transports. Around 90% or a little bit over 90% of Finnish forest industry's production is exported via sea. And of course, we need ICT, and financial sector. And sectors or operations depending on forest industry, also energy. Forest industry produces electricity as well as it uses it, and our production produces a lot of excess heat that can be used for district heating. And as a byproduct of our production, there are some wood fuels being generated, bark, sawdust, wood chips, and so on. And our products and side streams are used widely in other critical industries or sectors, such as food industry, the packaging materials, chemical industry uses, for instance, pine oil, turpentine, and so on. Our defense forces need building materials for the preparedness building or construction. Construction industry, of course, needs also construction materials. Healthcare products are produced by forest industry as well as packaging materials for healthcare. Media, of course, needs printing paper. And logistics, well, majority of stuff today is in carton boxes when we order them or ship them somewhere. So cardboard and carton are very important for logistics, and also, for example, adhesive labels. So also wastewater treatment. Many mills also treat municipal wastewater in addition to treating their own wastewater. And of course, forest industry is a major customer for land transport, water transport, and ports. Going on, here's some sections of legislation relevant to forest industry's role for security of supply. So we have this Security of Supply Act, which states that we have to safeguard subsistence of the population, the country's economy, and defense, well, among other things, but these especially related to forest industry. And then we have Emergency Powers Act, which also states we have to protect the population, secure population's livelihood and country's economy, safeguard the territorial integrity and independence. And also the same Powers Act in section 45 says that we must secure the supply of wood and peat. This section gives the regional authority, we call ELY Center, power to direct the use of wood. So ELY Center can oblige landowner, timber owner, holder of the right to cut wood to hand over wood and timber if needed. And of course, in order to safeguard the country's economy, energy supply, and necessary construction in the exceptional circumstances. And the section 46 gives you more detailed information what is meant by a necessary construction. And how this relates to forest industry. Forest industry provides lots of jobs for people, of course. 38,000 directly and over 80,000 indirectly. And of course brings a lot of income via taxes and investments to the society. And forest industry also has a big regional impact because our operations and jobs are spread across Finland. And of course, we are the second largest industry in Finland by value of production. Largest being the technology industry. And here's some figures on energy supply. So some 28% of the energy used in Finland is produced by burning wood. And of course, we also provide district heating as a byproduct of our production. Also working as grid power balance management system. So some mills are part of this system that if some kind of power plant somewhere in the grid goes offline, then certain functions in a mill go offline also, so it balances the grid. And of course, many mills are located near running water or rapids, and therefore they operate hydropower plants. Also, biodiesel is produced from wood raw material. And going on to necessary building materials in an emergency situation. So around 11 million cubic meters of sawn timber is produced in Finland. Most of that is exported to the customers abroad, but the remaining 30% or so is used in Finland, and most of that is used for construction. And as I mentioned before, there's a necessary building or construction in emergency situations and consists of Finnish Defence Forces preparedness construction. It utilizes sawn timber, plywood, prefabricated wooden elements that is used for bunkers and fortifications, for example, bridges and so on, shelters. And there's also this necessary construction and repair more related to civil preparedness or safety of the civil population. We have to be able to build shelters and housing, for example, if there would be some kind of situation that we have to evacuate population somewhere. Okay, maybe that covers the most of the relevance to forest industries, meaning to security of supply. And then I would like to also shed a little light on how our network in Finland works to provide this security of supply. So this is a comprehensive security model of Finland. This is maintained by the Security Committee, and they state that safeguarding society's vital functions is a joint effort by authorities, companies, associations, and individuals. And we have this diamond diagram or picture here, and forest industry and other industries, and the NESA basically reside here in this lower corner in the economy, infrastructure, and security of supply. So this gives like wholesome view on the functions that are vital for society. This is a starting point. And then we have NESO, this National Emergency Supply Organization, which is led by NESA here in the center. It brings together all the stakeholders within the network. There are regulatory authorities, ministries, and so on. There are private sectors, companies. For example, there's public sector. And I have highlighted here some stakeholders that I've been, for example, in close contact this year. So this gives you a little bit of a view on how the network works and how wide it is and all the things it reaches to. And NESA's organization is divided in 7 sectors described here, and the purpose of these sectors is to promote cooperation between authorities and businesses, and coordinate and monitor preparedness, analyze risk and future trends, and oversee the work of pools. And forest pool is part of the industry sector. There are 6 other pools in industry sector: technology, forest, defense, plastic and rubber, construction industry, chemical industry. And here are some focal points of what our goal is, or what are our focal points. So competence is a critical resource. We have the safeguarded supply of critical manufacturing materials, production of critical materials during wartime, and construction capacity is needed in severe disruptions. Also supports the Finnish defense forces. And here's my view on the key elements for resilience. You need legislation that supports resilience and security of supply. You need to recognize and involve the relevant parties and stakeholders in order to achieve better resilience. So regulative authorities, companies, public sector, and third sector. And you should have an active network and work together on a regular basis. So here are some examples of what we are doing. We are maintaining situational awareness, following certain indicators on a steady basis, mapping threats and risks, building scenarios, find ways to mitigate threats and risk, and exercise and training together. So that's very important to find like gaps in your plans and perhaps find things perhaps in legislation that may be good to revise in order to streamline our plans or operations during emergency. And this is like never-ending work. We are never ready. We can always be better. So these are the basic things that we use to have some kind of structure in our work. So we need scenarios for long-time planning. So we have the big picture, what the future holds. We have alternate scenarios, including alternate threats and risks. And then we can assess what threats or risks different scenarios involve. And of course, when we know our threats and risks, we can plan how we can prepare, how our value chain is affected, and the means to mitigate, and how they differ between scenarios. We must plan, of course, against also the regulation, what is involved in our plans. And we have to define the indicators for monitoring. And by following the indicators, we may make decisions or see if the scenarios are shifting somewhere, or is our preparedness at the right level? Should we do something more, or so on? And then you have the implementation, exercise and training, of course, situational awareness, and studies and projects. And my last slide, again, I like to emphasize the importance of the functioning network. And I think the Finnish system is somewhat special in that regard, that it includes private companies also in this network. So we have found it very useful for our work, because companies, forest industry, for example, they produce a lot of goods and welfare for society. I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olli. We have much to learn and a system to build in many countries, I think. So very good. Now we've heard from from Ukraine, we've heard from Finland, and now we will come to Sweden, who have recently restarted its work on geopolitical preparedness. And that has been led by the Royal Academy of Agriculture and Forestry, and sharing that work have been Lena Ek, former member of the parliament in Sweden and in EU, and also a previous minister in Sweden. So please, Lena, I will share your slides.
Yes, yeah. That's nice.
So please.
Here it is.
Floor is yours.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. And coming after to such experts is a bit difficult, but I will do my best. And of course, the Ukrainian presentation goes right not only to the head but also to the heart. And we are also, I will come back to that, extremely impressed by the very coherent work in Finland in this area. And maybe that is why the Royal Academy of Agriculture and Forestry in Sweden started the work on preparedness in crisis situations. And I was asked to lead the group when it comes to forestry and energy. Next slide, please. Thank you. And very short, we experienced a real need of support to companies and organizations in this area. And our work has been very well received. I think the sense of urgency has increased for every week that we've seen the situation in Ukraine, the Russian invasion there. Next slide, please. So the tradition of an academy is, of course, to work broadly with a lot of societal interest, and we have worked both with academia, of course, with the companies, and as 50% of the forest in Sweden is private owned, there are also big, huge corporations like Södra Skogsägarna that many in the business knows about, Mellanskog, Norrskog, but also with Swedish authorities and the Swedish different parts of the Swedish defense system, and also the companies and the unions. So it's been a very broad work. Next slide, please. The governmental organization for preparedness in crisis is divided in different areas, different sectors, and I won't dive into this. It's just to present or to inform people that is not in the forestry sector how many areas of society where the forest is important and contributes, and in order to do that also needs support from other sectors, as we saw in both previous presentations. Next slide, please. So we work with the background and information gathering. We've analyzed value chains within different parts of the sector, and tried to define the role of forest and the forest industry in supply preparedness. And finally, of course, we came to some conclusions, and using also the experience of huge fires in the mid and north of Sweden, and the enormous storm Gudrun that in 24 hours brought down as much forest as a whole yearly cutting in Sweden. And that was, of course, causing a trauma both in the industry, but also for the forest owners and for people in general, as forest is so entwined in the Swedish cultural life as well. So next slide, please. We work with roundtable discussions, different workshops, and information gatherings, and a couple of big seminars open to the public as well. Next slide, please. And I'm going to use some of the slides, a few slides from, first of all, the Swedish forest industry organization, and secondly, from a professor in energy from Lund University. But next slide, please. Starting with Sweden as a country of forestry. And when I was a member of the European Parliament in Brussels, I realized that in many European countries, the forests have names. In Sweden, it's forest all over. More than 70% of the country is forest covered. And I think this map from the European Commission shows this. This means that it is also for the scarcely populated country like Sweden, with only 10 million inhabitants, and a vast country. If you turn Sweden around, you end up in south of the Mediterranean, as you can see on the map. So it's a very long country. It means that the forest industry is also a huge part of the economy and how the society is organized. Next slide, please. And in a scarcely populated country like ours, it's unique to have a business sector or an industry sector that covers the whole country and has a nationwide presence. And this is, of course, extremely important when we look at economy, at energy, or at defense. But at the same time, it's, of course, a plus to have all the equipment, all the educated people, all those who knows the landscape and the roads and so on by heart, and have them spread all over the country. Next slide, please. So it's not only the Swedish economy and the Swedish society that is dependent on the forestry sector. If we look at the paper and the cardboard part here, you see that 8% is used in Sweden, but there is a huge export to Germany, Italy, France, Poland, and the rest of the internal market, as well as UK. And also globally to China, Asia, and 4% to the US. And if we look at the paper pulp, if 54% is exported, of the production is exported to the European internal market. And this means that it's not only when it comes to different kinds of crises that Sweden as a society is dependent on the Swedish forestry sector. Many of our fellow EU members are also dependent on that the Swedish industry is up and running in whatever circumstances that might occur. Same goes for Finland, I would say. Next slide, please. And this huge industry and forestry sector is, of course, making its own energy. Before the big international oil crisis, much of the burners and the drying was done with the help of oil or even coal, but mostly oil. Today, it's industry itself is making the energy needed, and also, of course, providing the society with a lot of energy. Next slide, please. There is also a lack of knowledge on what the forest can provide for other industrial sectors, and I think that was mentioned also in the Finnish presentation from Ali Antonen. It's not only sawn timber, paper products, paper pulp, but it's also energy and other things. And more, the industry is moving into using the fiber more or less as if you remember the notion of a Russian doll, where you have a big one and then the next one and the smaller one and the next one. And more products are being developed as the industry is extremely innovative nowadays. And it's everything from car parts to food to the chemical industry to textiles and so on and so forth. And I think the knowledge of this is not very widely spread, and we need to inform decision makers about this. Next slide, please. Of course, there's a lot of employees and people dependent on the different parts of the sector. It's a huge part of the gross national product, and I've already mentioned the export and the dependency in other European countries. Next slide, please. Moving into a little bit, talk a little bit about the energy dependencies. Next slide, please. And these are slides from Professor Paul Börjesson, a well-known expert and professor at the Lund University. And this is a slide that tries to explain how the interdependencies are. And while I'm not going to dive into details here either, just a few things to remember from this slide. The yearly growth is 120, roughly 120 million cubic meter, and we are using like 80% of the yearly growth. The rest stays in the forest. And as you see, it's only in the middle, there's this big, huge circle that is a pulp facility, and the streams that comes into the industry and what goes out. And it's a lot of dependencies. And many people think when it comes to a crisis, to provide raw materials to the industry, that you could just go down in production from 100% to 80% or something like that, or make other things. But these extremely complicated installations cannot move up and down in production like that. It's extremely difficult, and to close down a facility like this is a process of quite a long time, and to get it up and running to its full speed and potential is a very complicated process. So these facilities has to be protected in times of crisis. The streams of raw materials has to be protected in order to provide the society, for example, with energy, with district heating, with hygienic products, and with building materials and all kinds of products. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. If we look at the Swedish power system, you can see how it changed from 1970 till the year 2022, and how the bioenergy in the society as a whole has increased during this time, and the use of the brown section fossil oil has decreased. Basically, it's mostly in transport that we still use fossil oil. Otherwise, bioenergy has taken over as the most important source. And of course, most of this almost everything of this comes from the forest. Next slide, please. Here you can see that also the industry is extremely dependent on bioenergy from the forest sector. Electricity production on top, district heating, extremely important, transport, housing sector, and industry at the bottom. And we foresee that this development will continue, and the use of bioenergy will be more effective, but also will increase in volume. Next slide, and we can move to the next slide again. So the question is, are we already on top of what we can produce from forestry, or can we increase in the time of crisis or for economic use? And this is a prediction from research, where you see that we are able to increase domestic bioenergy, for example, by being more effective when it comes to using the leftovers from cutting in the forest that are now mainly remain at the cutting areas. And also by using already presented technology and innovation, but that is not installed yet. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. I included a couple of slides if you want to study them afterwards. So what we see is having the Swedish forest doubly mostly in the environmental protection systems and the certification systems, rather, both FSC and PEFC. We regard our national forestry as sustainable, and within those limits, we could still increase the use of energy coming from forests. And next slide. Here, Lund University has looked into the current EU regulation that is in the pipeline, and you see that this here the potential might disappear or depending on the outcome of current negotiations. So next slide. Moving over to how this, next slide, please. Moving over to what we can, how we look at this very complex system in times of crisis and how to be prepared. We have, after having worked with the wide sectors of the society, we have some conclusions. Next slide, please. Next slide. And you could, yeah. So the first conclusion is that the forest industry is not included in preparedness planning in Sweden currently. It's very rare to find a region or an authority that has looked into all the different angles of what can happen and what the forestry sector needs to be up and running even in a crisis of some sort. Next. You could take up all the bullet points, please. And as I presented, it's not only products, it's also infrastructure and expertise. And in these vast countries, half of the road system is private forestry roads. And not always, you cannot always find them in maps or in information. But those who live and work in the forest knows exactly every tree and every stone and where to go and where you could move with heavy vehicles, for example. One side of the coin is to look at the public regulation and the state authority and state responsibility, but the other side of the coin, the private companies and the forest owners, and as we have, I think, 250,000 private forest owners, and as I said, 50% of the forests are private owned, roughly. We need to work like Finland to engage also the companies and the forest owners, and they are not engaged in planning right now. The expectations and basic prerequisites in the companies must be clarified and communicated. What is your responsibility? What are you supposed to be doing, when and where? Which people do you need to keep in the company to keep it running, or in the forest to keep it run, and which can move into the state defense system. We need more long-term and stable rules for biofuel production. And this goes both for Stockholm and Brussels. It's a lot of going back and forward and to the left and to the right and stopping and long-term predictions on what will happen and your responsibilities will have to be installed urgently, I would say. Cooperation important, and I mentioned Finland. We've looked into the system that Finland has, and we're extremely impressed on the planning and the financing and the cooperation in the Finnish system. And you need to exercise. There are no exercises more than specifically on one plant. If something's happened here, what shall we do? But not in a regional or national perspective. And we need to plan for contingency solutions. So the last slide, please. Proposed actions. Some sectors are classified as being of societal importance, like the finance sector, for example. We propose that the forestry sector will have the same level of importance in the planning system. And secondly, we need to identify critical input products for the industry. And we realized when the COVID hit Europe that this was a very weak point for all industry, but specifically for us. Third point, we need to accelerate opportunities for electricity generating installations and regionalize this. The electricity system is planned on a national level, but in times of crisis, you need to also know that it's working regionally and also in the small municipalities. Biofuel production, what should we run the defense system on? What should we run the fire brigades on? What should we run the ambulances on? This needs to be cleared. And we need to define critical physical and digital infrastructure. And this is not only on the ground, it's also in the air, meaning GSM systems, for example, and other digital functions. And there has to be preparedness plans, and there has to be exercises, as I mentioned before, cross-societal exercises to enhance cooperation. And 8, emergency legislation. The legislation that we have in place right now is for sunny days with no winds. We need to look into this and see what can be done and whose responsibility it is to take action in a time of crisis. And this was also demonstrated in the big fires and in the big storm Gudrun. And there has to be a forum for cooperation and discussions on preparedness issues. And lastly, I mentioned it, I think, 10 times now. We have a cooperation with Finland in many areas. We have the same, very much the same interest, and we need to cooperate more. And Sweden has to learn from Finland. I would say I could, in this seminar, I could add an 11th point. Brussels need to see the impact of the forest sector and realize that also Brussels need planning and cooperation in preparedness issues concerning forestry and what the forest can contribute with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena, for your presentation. Thank you also for the honesty in explaining not just what the country is doing right, but also what the gaps are in the governance and practice system.
If I may add, having worked both in the European Parliament for 7 years and in the Global Board for the PFC and many forestry organizations, I think that this goes more or less for all the member states in the European Union and the Commission.
Yeah, I was about to say that despite the different focus of the presentation, I think there are some common points that all the countries agree on, that there are things that need to be improved and need to be focused. Welcome back to everybody who's back. And as said before, now we will hear from our last speaker, Richard Silfwerbrand, who is the Chief Executive of the Forestry Commission in the UK. And he will give us an overview of the United Kingdom's on what is needed from the expert for decision makers to include preparedness and into the political agenda. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's a very hard act to follow coming on after Igor, Olli and Lena. And what fantastic presentations. And Igor, we salute you and everything that you're going through, trying to fight off the invasion, and how you brought that to life for forestry is humbling. And Olli and Lena giving really good presentations about the preparedness of Finland and Sweden. In many ways, I come from the other end of the spectrum. The United Kingdom, a very congested country, a very urban country, and doesn't have a culture of forestry. And what we are starting to do, and I think it is only just starting to do, is understand the geopolitical impact of some of the climate issues that we're facing. And there's a slow process, but it's starting to happen in the UK. So if we look at the global context, that's already been brought out by previous speakers, but we are living in a less stable world, and there's a much bigger impact on the Northern Hemisphere than there has been in the recent past. State conflict on our doorstep, Igor's brought that to life. We've heard about the migration into Europe caused by conflict, but to what extent is that impacted by climate change as well? And we've seen degrees of social unrest. Energy and resource insecurity is becoming more and more prevalent. And then also the water, food and resource competition, which previous speakers have all brought out. So we've got more pressures and demands on our forests, in particular on timber and some of the UN forecasts of how much we're going to need in the future. We've got the increased impact of pests, diseases and wildfires, and the biodiversity loss, all of which are impacting on our security. As I say, in the UK, there's now just starting to be a realization that this is more than just biodiversity loss or climate loss. It is having an impact and will have an impact on national security. So if I go right back to basics, so forgive me for going right back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And of course, we all understand that. But what does that mean from a government perspective in a conflict? Igor and others have brought this out very clearly. But of course, it's a government responsibility to provide the psychological needs and the safety needs. And forestry has a really important part to play in those needs. And previous speakers have already brought this out. And we've got the need for food, water quality, flood mitigation, fuel, that was brought out very clearly by Lena, construction, shelter, shade, and the protection of forests. I put on here mudslides and avalanche. And of course, Igor has said, of course, protection of forces as well. All of those can and are provided by forestry. Do enough people realise that? And I think from a UK perspective, the answer is probably not. And we don't have this culture of forestry. We have a very urban-centric population. And we're in quite a bad position, if I'm perfectly honest. A recent survey that we conducted said that 42% of people in Britain think it is wrong to cut a tree down under any circumstance, even if that tree will be replaced by a new planting. That is absolutely untenable and something we need to sort out. Easier said than done with a very urban-centric population. A quick bit of history, and in many ways a history of how the UK found ourselves in a really bad position. So the Forestry Commission was established in 1919. And the reason why we were established is, in effect, we cut all our trees down. So we're pretty much a nation of lumberjacks. We cut it down during the Industrial Revolution for coal mining and then for the wars as well. And so an Act of Parliament was passed to found the Forestry Commission to provide a sustainable source of timber. And that's what we were faced with, and that's what we were told to do back in 1919. And this is what I call the lumberjack graph. We cut the whole lot down effectively until the end of the end of the First World War. And we've not done a bad job. We've doubled our tree cover in the last 100+ years. It's not enough. For the UK is at 13.5%, but England at 10%. That is just not tenable, and we're taking steps to improve that. It's of course a slow process. But are we actually ready? How prepared are we when it comes to resilience? If we just look at long-term security, we are absolutely not ready. We are the second largest importer of timber by volume in the world, only after China, and we're not planting enough productive forestry. A lot of what we're planting, particularly in England at the moment, is broadleaf trees, and we have, somewhat unusually for Europe, we have the grey squirrel. We have the grey squirrel, which is causing significant damage to hardwood timber crops, and we're not planting enough of the productive conifer species in England. Not so bad in Scotland, and they've got done a really good work in Scotland, 90% tree cover and going up. There's more to do. We've got increased flooding risks, and we've got problems with water quality, and we know that forestry, woodlands in the right place can help attend to both of those risks, and starting to have that understanding. Not fast enough, but it is starting to be understood by policymakers and potentially ministers. But there will be a growing demand. We have got very limited land. We've got problems with food security as well. And whenever we talk about more tree planting, the farming lobby say, well, what about food security? Well, we've done our mapping. We've done the maths. We've worked out where it can go without affecting the prime agricultural land. And not entirely surprising, there is room for it all, but there's internal debates between various organisations about that. So how do we get people to understand that forests are strategic assets? It's understood in some countries represented here. It's not understood in the UK in the same way. But I put forward that we are actually, in many ways, the UK is in a very similar position to the way we were in 1990. We've got too little woodland cover. Although we've doubled it in the last 106 years, we need to do more. And we are starting to see forestry and woodlands as a strategic asset in resilience, but we've got a long way to go. And previous speakers have already talked about carbon capture, water. Public health is not one that's been talked about a lot, but for us, we have a health problem, real big health problem in the UK. And outdoor exercise is, of course, an extremely good way of attending to both physical and mental health. We are not good at using timber in construction. In England, it's only 9% of buildings built with timber frame, whereas it's 90% in Scotland. We don't quite understand why there's such that differentiation, but there is. And again, just starting to understand we need to use this better. And what have we done about this? We've run a very successful horizon scanning awareness with a number of universities and other organisations across the UK. And that has been a stark reminder that the significant risk of catastrophic ecosystem collapse in forests could and would have a really big impact on the UK. And we need to learn and we need to adjust and adapt. And this is where Forest Europe is being so helpful and looking at sustainable forest management, which most people will be very, very familiar with. So how do we get forests onto the agenda of ministers and policymakers? I think the UK has moved forward, and the Strategic Defence Review recently concluded. And this is starting to get after the whole of society defence and resilience and strengthening our domestic resilience. It doesn't specifically mention forests. It does talk about food security, we are working hard to make sure whenever people mention food security, they're also talking about timber security. And we are starting to learn those lessons from the COVID pandemic and looking at supply chain vulnerabilities and global instability. National security is a government-wide principle. Again, that's starting to feed into more of the way policies are made, and the domestic production is a really important part of that. So what about the relevance of forests to resilience? Much of this has already been covered, apart perhaps from the health aspect, which I regard as being a really important part of it, particularly for us in a very urban population, and the social cohesion piece. We are, I said, a very urban-centric population. There is a growing divide between urban and rural populations, and lack of understanding between the two, which is a concern for us. Speed of reaction is covered very well by Igor and others, how you can use forest products there and then in conflict and conflict rebuilding after conflict. But we've got to get ahead of the curve, if you like. But it takes 40 plus years to grow a timber crop. So, we should have been starting this a long time ago, but we need to absolutely start it now. So what can Forest Europe do? From my perspective, I think, and Lena very eloquently said much the same, that we need to get ministers and policymakers to understand that we need to do more at home. From a UK perspective, we give quite a lot of overseas aid in the forest area. But this goes to South American rainforests. Why are we not doing more and understanding more at home? Not necessarily from an aid perspective, but understand that we actually have that catastrophic ecosystem collapse I talked about. Well, there are people on these screens who know better than I that some of the impacts of pest and disease around Europe are absolutely significant, and we need to attend to those and understand that this is on our doorstep. It's not just in South America. Again, others have mentioned a forest crisis preparedness framework for Europe. I think is a really important point. I think we need to get ministers to really sit up and take notice of this. And I think the people represented on these screens, it's up to us to make sure that happens. We've got to make sure that we get through some of what I describe as the treacle to get through policy, to get ministers to understand that actually we need to take action now because it takes so long to grow forests, to change forest ecosystems, and capitalise on the really good research, much of which, or most of which, have been shared around Forest Europe. And that's a really important point of how we need to move forward and understand how we can do better. And the answer is we need to do it now. We probably should have done it yesterday, but now is the second best time to do this. So how do we actually articulate what we need, and how ready are we really in the UK? As I said, probably not very is the short answer. A slow dawning realization, and having been involved in a previous career, many people have been talking about exercising, and I wholeheartedly endorse that. The UK has in fact got quite a good local resilience for, and does exercise on a regular basis. Tends not to do it for much of the direct forest impacts, although it does occasionally. But how forests can help with the resilience is something we need to feed into that exercise planning process. And how do we take people's attention, not necessarily away from tropical rainforests, because they are important, but also highlight we have these problems at home, and home I do include Europe, and it's on our doorstep, and we need to make sure that people understand this. We do need to take action. We do need to understand that we've got to have resilience across the board. And of course, that resilience is codependent. All of us have to be ready. And because if one nation is not as prepared as others, we'll all have to help out. So the more that we help each other, the better it is. We are very much a powerful collective. And this is, I think, a real strength of Forest Europe and something that we need to come together and help ministers understand. So I think it's a really good opportunity to prepare something for next year. So perhaps my final point, some may regard a little bit cheesy, but we are in an emergency, and people need to understand that. And so perhaps I can steal Lord Kitchener from the First World War. We need to get out there and get more people understanding forestry. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. I find myself repeating myself, but thank you for the brutal honesty and to highlight the urgency of these topics that we're talking today and the urgency of actually taking actions. So now we will move on to the panel session that we have prepared. Our presenter will send some questions in advance and we will go through that one by one. And the public is very much welcome to write their questions in the chat, and we can take them at the end of the panel discussion if there is time. So, Fredrik, I think you can start.
Yes, please start your cameras, all of you in the panel. And Olli too, please. So we start with the question of, now you have heard these other speakers, you have learned from each other. And I think it's, yeah, I can conclude that. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, at least. But what assumptions have you made in the past, or what will you revise from hearing the other speakers? And we can start with maybe Lena, ladies first. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. Very interesting for so different perspectives, and the difference in public view in the UK and in Sweden is like 100% different. And that's very interesting. At the same time, UK is depending on export from Sweden and has been for many hundreds of years. The prop going into the coal mines, for example, and Sweden was also cut bare almost 120 years ago when the state introduced the forest replanting legislation 1905, which has meant that we have increased forestry both by volume and by stems every year except the big storm year with Gudrun since then, and are continuing to do this. And if Europe could understand both the need of forestry but also have the same replanting legislation, and I think that would be a very good thing. And from a climate point of view, I didn't go into climate really, but if you look at what the forest means in CO2 uptake, which I think Igor explained from the Ukrainian point of view very well, what we have to add is the role of substitution. Which is 5 to 6 times more than a healthy forest, what a healthy forest can give in terms of CO2 uptake. And I think this has to be brought both to decision makers and to the public. And that's one. And realizing that we need to work together, drawing from different experiences and work together in Europe and include the wider Europe, including Ukraine. Because what we've learned from Ukraine is a lot of things, and it's terrible to hear your story, Igor, knowing a lot, of course, beforehand, but have the facts and figures the way Russia is working. And I agree, it's really urgent. We're talking urgency here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Everyone will call you tomorrow, Olli. I guess, is there anything you have learned from the other speakers?
Yeah, for sure. I was happy to see that we all share the similar view on the importance of forest industry for resilience. It came through in all the presentations, and of course, there are new viewpoints for me. For instance, in Igor's presentation, I know for example, the forest fires are a thing that we discuss a lot in other like networks that not involve the resilience point of view. But in the resilience point of view, we don't really talk a lot about forest fires today. So that would be something that we could maybe concentrate more on. And also in the research presentation, the role of forest in providing like shade or shelter and these kind of things, preventing flooding and other stuff. That's not that we in the NESA or NESO we are not doing today so much. We're more concentrated on perhaps more towards the threats related to current political and safety situation, other than concentrating on the environmental side. And Lena's presentation, I think I saw a lot of familiar things, and you have a very similar view on the forest's role. And it seems that you're doing a lot of good things, I think, and going in the right direction in my point of view. And I think because our countries are quite similar and scarcely populated, lots of forest, and I think we should, and perhaps we will, I hope we will do something cooperation more for in the future years. I know there's some developments to this direction between NESA and MSB, for instance. So I think we will be working closer together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Igor, your key takeaways from the other speakers.
Well, for me, it's really very interesting to know about approach which used for preparedness, to assess preparedness of country on the country level, look to the strategical perspective, and indeed, we learning by doing in the case of our country. And some kind of experience we got, it is a stressful situation. Country in crisis have to pay attention for defense, first of all, but it's really important what was stressed by Lena. It's necessary to have good scientific background, good scientific data, monitoring data, scientific data, and especially scenario modeling and prognosis, how to manage in different situations, how to manage in different scenarios which happened due to, of course, in wartime, it's difficult to prepare scenarios because situation change very quickly and a lot of things can be happen. But we have to have models, we have to have monitoring data, we have to share our knowledge and experience between each other. So very important, it's international cooperation and cross-sectoral issues. I will stress cross-sectoral, it's most of for between forest people and between forest manager emergency. In our case, we have to stress preparedness cannot be sectoral. It should be cross-sectoral. And protected forests are not automatically safe. We solve a lot of dangerous situations which happened in the forest area, and even contaminated by unexploded object. It is a big problem from different point of view, from the safe of life, from the animals, for the biodiversity. And if such forest contaminated, even age forest, for example, conifer forest in the type condition which dangerous for fires, it can be very big problem and necessary prepare special protocols which allow us, first of all, protect the local communities, protect forest workers, and we have to have good maps, we have to have monitoring data and data which are ready for sharing between different governmental bodies and different stakeholders. And also we have to think about some trade-offs. Is acceptable or not? I would say would be better to make some prescribed fire invasion. From other hand, we have a risk to lost whole area of forest. So it's really necessary to explain for communities, for different stakeholders, needs active forest management practices. Because people think, okay, prevent leave forest along, they grow themselves, no need nothing. But it's not really a good idea. In Ukraine, forest managed very intensively, and we have to support, taken in consideration, climate change, future challenges which can be increased. So, from my point of view, such a webinar and sharing of knowledge is really very important, and I'm thankful for this event and for sharing of knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Igor. One of my key takeaways, and that's why we also are here, is because we need to collaborate more, learn from each other. And I think that was kind of your key message, Richard. What did you learn from the others?
I'm going to say something which is going to sound rather strange. And I often say that whilst I am Chief Executive of the Forest Commission, my business is behavioural change. We're trying to get people to change the way they operate. And I think the three presentations of Igor, Ollie and Lena were fantastic in articulating what the issues and the problems are, and how some countries, the gold standard in Finland, and how we should all be aspiring to head in those directions. And I think we collectively must use Forest Europe to effectively give a wake-up call to our ministers to say, we really do need to take some action now to make a difference, because we're not the same as agriculture. It's a minimum of 40 years to grow a crop. It's a minimum of that 40 years to actually make a real difference. We've got to start doing this now. And the day-to-day politics that we have in the UK, it may be the same elsewhere, but they're only ministers are interested in tomorrow's headlines. They can't think 3 years, let alone 40 years. So we've got to help shape those debates and change those behaviours. It's a lot more difficult than it sounds, but it's beholden, I would suggest, upon us and organisations like Forest Europe to try and help affect that change.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your inputs. And now we move on to the second question that we sent you. How resilient are your essential supplies in terms of energy, water, food, and materials, which is all areas that you touched during your presentations? And how resilient are those during time of geopolitical changes and disruptions, as we are somehow now? And what is your backup plan if those supplies are disrupted? And of course, if you can also input of what is the most urgent area that now needs focus in your country. If anybody wants to start, or we can go through the same order as before, and Lena can start.
Okay, I think we've had in Sweden a couple of wake-up calls that I personally thought would give give more rings on the water, if I may use a Swedish saying. And that was, of course, the big storm, where we learned that the public facilities are not enough, and I think this is much the same as the Ukrainian experience. It's how people act together and help each other. And the big fires, again, things hadn't been thought through. There wasn't enough planning, there wasn't enough material, and even with European support, even Italian fire people were coming to Sweden to help. It was extremely difficult. So there has to be material, there has to be cross-sector cooperation. And suddenly, at the largest fire, farmers appeared with a big equipment for spraying manure. They used it for spraying water instead, and it turned out that their equipment was 5 times more effective than what was in the fire brigade in terms of water volume and distance spreading, and also, of course, the local knowledge. Where can you drive without getting stuck in the mud or whatever? So training and planning is really key, and planning also for the unexpected. When COVID hit Europe and the whole globe, the industry realized that we are bringing in a few but very vital chemicals by train from Italy, and the drivers are not allowed to cross the border. It meant that it had to involve negotiations with all the governments from Italy to Sweden to be able to bring these chemicals through to keep the industry going. And that is, 50% of the Swedes have district heating. 50%. Every other person has district heating. And that is basically provided. The fuel is basically leftovers from cutting and from the industry. So, the district heating cannot be closed down in this country. I mean, imagine you live in Stockholm on the 9th floor, then you can. it's impossible, but still it can happen, and the planning for this is not there. It's not in place. So we have a huge lot of lessons to learn. Tragically, I think we will learn a lot from Ukraine and the way you are dealing with things daily, and introducing a sort of innovative thinking to deal with the crisis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Olli, would you like to jump in next?
Yes, I think energy-wise, water-wise, food-wise, we're quite well prepared. But that being said, we're also heavily dependent of marine transports. So 95% of all the goods that are imported to Finland come from the or through the Baltic Sea by ships. So if those streams were to be interrupted or disrupted somehow, we would be pretty soon in a state of emergency of some sort, at least. So that's one thing we have to keep in mind, that we are not able to survive without our neighbors and our partners and our value chains and so on. That we are not an island, so to speak, and cannot run Finland in an island mode. So that's one thing that we have to consider. And okay, we have done this resilience work for decades now. Perhaps we would survive somewhat better than some other country or like so that haven't been done so much work. But even if we had cross-border stream disruptions, I'll give us like a couple of months, and then it would be a chaos.
Good, thank you very much. Igor, would you like to add something to this discussion?
Yes, sure. Thank you. And forest, resilience, which based on the forest and forestry, it's a crucial point in crisis situation. Because when trade routes collapse, and in this case, forests become like critical reserve of energy, materials, food, timber, and source of clean water. So we have to think about decentralization of energy supply, and forest can help us a lot in this case. For example, in Ukraine, after recently sharing of Russia missiles, a lot of cities and villages faced with collapse with energy supply. And in this case, decentralization, it is a solution which can help people to live in more or less good condition. And also we have to maintain for strategic biomass stock to keep forest ready for supply of wood for emergency situation, for the defense purpose. And also in the same case, multifunctional forest management, it's really important because we have to care about forested catchment to receive a clean water supply, and also restore landscape as part of national security planning. And we have to have holistic approach for forest management planning. From one hand, from another hand, we have to receive real time data from different kind of monitoring system to be able operatively react for the challenge which happened in our forest.
Thank you. As we said before, I think the experience of Ukraine is really teaching us how much urgent all these matters are, and how forests are crucial for national and European and pan-European security. Richard, if you would like to add anything to this discussion.
A couple of points just to finish off with. How resilient are we? I think we need to understand that collectively we're all shifting a bit, partly because of post-COVID, partly because of trade. And we've all I think all of us need to attend to our supply chains and what our resilience levels are. But the question for politicians, just-in-time logistics are all very well, but they don't work particularly well if there's a disruption. But resilience costs, how much are we prepared to invest into it? And that's above the pay grade of most people on these screens. And I think it's up to us to help articulate the cost of not doing that investment. And I think Olli and Igor have been very good at articulating what could be done. And the rest of us need to understand that cost, that insurance policy, is worth paying, because, as I tried to highlight, some of those threats are really rather close.
And if I may add, we need to support Ukraine in all matters, with everything we can on all levels, for obvious reasons.
Thank you so much. We will have to take one more panel question, and then we'll take questions from the chat so that our listeners also will be included. The collaboration with the civil sector and society, where is it the coordination there weakest, and how can we improve to include civil protection, the society, in the forestry preparedness work? I open the floor, so please feel free to answer.
So perhaps I can comment first. I thought about this question yesterday, and I think that the supply chain is the weakest link for some part, because we have a lot of like small subcontractors which may have a critical role for the forest industry company, and they don't necessarily realize their role in the system, or that they are providing this critical service for a critical company. There can be such a like they don't have enough resources to consider things like cybersecurity or physical security, and that exposes also the forest industry companies to threats through the supply chain.
Yes.
Yeah, please, Lena.
Adding to this, and it's partly the same. Transports via shipping, I think, is much more difficult than during World War I, because lots of countries has no ships to protect convoys anymore. So convoying material, that was the main thing during World War II, would be very difficult, because they cannot be protected, simply. And this has to be taken into account. And then I think decision makers hasn't understood the degree of digitalization in forestry and forest industry. I mean, every step that is taken when it comes to cutting is planned by every 10th meter, with the huge machinery that is going in order to protect biodiversity, water flows, the landscape planning, and everything that has to be in place to fulfill the certification criteria. And if you are in N1 or 2 of the voluntary certification schemes, like PFC and PEFC, FSC and PFC, you need to do this. And that's also what the forest owners and the public want. They want cuttings to look much more nice than they have traditionally and historically. And also, it's a huge transport machinery all over our countries to bring labor out. and everything here is digitalized, using satellites and GSM systems and so on and so forth. And the way we've seen Elon Musk open and shut down the Starlink system in Ukraine is a lesson to us all, I think. So this is one sector that is not discussed, but if you have experience from the big companies, and also the small ones are using these digital technologies to fulfill the criteria and to be as good as possible and as effective as possible. So these huge systems has to be upheld in every crisis, whether it's storm or if it is fire or if it's defense crisis or security crisis. So I would like to add this to Ollie's comment.
Could I just add one? I don't disagree at all, and we've got to make sure we do the wildfires and the storms and so on, but we haven't talked much about pest and disease. Mm. And I worry about, do we have enough measures in place to try and prevent the spread of those? It's not an easy thing to do. We all want open borders, but at the same time, we mustn't underestimate the threat of those diseases and those pests that are moving. And are we really doing enough to prevent them moving around? It's not easy, but I think we are seeing some of the devastation in some forests around Europe, which we all collectively have to try and prevent, and it's something we need to think about.
And we have Forest, our partners who work with the resilience for the forests, working on that. So I saw that Sylvia is here, who's leading that work. So it's also ongoing. But yeah,
but
that's important.
Having been in a plane flying over parts of Canada where the beetle had taken out vast areas, and I mean, there's an awful lot of distance you cover when you're up in a small plane, and everything is red and dead. Everything was red and dead, and that was natural forests in Canada. I think it gave me a respect for the diseases and the bugs that we have to face. And also here is knowledge and cooperation and innovation. And of course, I'm coming back to certification schemes where you are supposed to have a variety of plants and species in your planting. You're forced to have that. And I think that is extremely important from resilience point of view and also biodiversity point of view, to be able to protect our forests from different kinds of diseases. But they will come because climate is affecting, and we in a partly Arctic country like Sweden, you see that the mountain birch is moving upwards in a way that you can experience yourself. If you do some trekking in these areas. 10 years ago there was no birch in this area. Now it's all over the place, and that is of course caused by heating from the climate effect. And it's here, and it's not in the distant future. So also here is from a resilience point of view, it's extremely important that we are moving fast also in this area, and to have a combined effort and a cooperation. It might be that some people think that the spruce and things like that is too much in our landscapes, but they may be. I mean, if some of these sicknesses or bugs attack, it might be only broadleaf left, and they have their problems. So it's there are things to work with from all angles when it comes to protecting good forest.
Thank you. I think we have just 6 minutes left. I need 1 minute to conclude everything. So maybe 5 minutes of questions. We have covered the first one that I see that is really relevant here about geographical information and how we can handle that. I don't think we have so much answer, but we have talked about it, and it's really, really key here and really important. But Kevin from Ireland asks Richard that in Sweden and Finland we see a strong role for biofuel, and in UK has more of wind and sun in the winter, but do you see a stronger biofuel mix in Ireland in the future? You believe that's something you can do for preparedness?
We do have quite a lot of anaerobic digesters which produce energy. There's not a huge amount of forest products, mainly agricultural products, and waste goes into them. But I haven't got the figures to hand, but it's a not insignificant contribution to our energy needs. In terms of biofuels, in the same manner as elsewhere, we do quite a lot with biomass. Got a couple of biomass power stations. In true biofuels, there's some, as you know, there's quite a lot of research going on in this area, and I suspect it may be something that we see grow. But to put it into context, the amount of forest products we would need to be self-sufficient could end up being more than our allowable cut anyway. So it's the balance of how much we've got and how we can use it, which is why there's research into different plant species, tree species that might be able to help with that.
Thank you. You want to take the next? Thank you, Richard, for your answer. Do you want to take the next, Alessandra?
Yes, I think this is for, I'm not sure, for whoever wants to jump in. We have a question from Alec from Bangor University. Lina and Richard noted the Sweden and UK difference between imports and exports. It would seem the UK is less fundamentally strategically dependent on timber than it was for coal mining timber in the world wars of the last century. However, if in an emergency Sweden wants to export and in UK needs to import, is there an immediate mutual benefit from seaborne trade contingency planning? I think this is for Sweden and Finland. UK, sorry.
Yeah, and Finland too, because they are probably included in it. Yeah.
I think the answer is yes.
Great.
And I actually think that there are some contingencies on the sea trade and so on. The one I would add to that, and it's one that we feel quite strongly about, is we've got to make better use of the limited amounts of timber that we already do have, and find better ways of using what you might regard as not good timber and use it for different methods of fibre, etc., etc. And again, there's work going on in those areas, and it's trying to understand it's whilst the straight planks, of course, are great and they should be the highest standard. Where one doesn't have those, how can you make better use of the byproducts as well?
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have to stop with the questions now. I thank the panel so much for everything, giving their expertise and also for answering our questions, but time is up. We will continue now, me and Alessandra, with preparing a policy brief with the help. It will not be that hard because I think both Lena and Olli and have produced a lot of it in their presentations and with the support of Richard and Igor have said. So that's what we will continue with, and then we will be in contact with you, reviewing it in the future. And we also invite other experts. If anyone else wants to join who sits here and listen to us, we would be grateful if you would join the group of experts that we can share and review what our future work that we will present at the Ministerial Conference in June. Hopefully, it will be something to awaken the eyes for the decision makers to include it in the political agenda. Thumbs up. Thank you so much, especially to our presenters, but also to everyone joining. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.